Hello, everybody. Welcome to Natural World Safaris and our webinar for our East Greenland fly-in safari trip. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Ben. I'm one of the polar specialists here at Natural World Safaris, and I have the very enviable job of getting to talk about this kind of stuff every day. So I've been to the Arctic quite a few times, been to Antarctica, and it's my job and my joy to help everybody else experience this fantastic part of the world too. So I'm here today to talk through our East Greenland fly-in safari trip, which we think is one of the best trips out there. And it's an incredible area. And I'm going to talk you through the trip itself, the wildlife you can see, all the bits that you can expect to experience on this trip. And hopefully some of you will be able to come and join us as well. So without further ado, let me click through. So just a little bit about me. I've been going to the Arctic for about 13 years now. I first went to Svalbard in 2012 and have been hooked ever since. And I've been heading back to various places in the Arctic, also to Antarctica. So I've seen a lot. There's loads more to see, which hopefully I'm going to be traveling there a lot more in the future. I absolutely love it. You know, just the wildlife, the feeling of isolation, the scenery. In the Arctic, the culture as well is incredible, and that's one of the things, sort of areas I'm going to touch on a little bit on this trip, with visits to some of the remote settlements of East Greenland. It's an amazing part of the world. So that's a bit about me, my background, the Arctic sort of experience that I've got, and hopefully I can share some of that passion with you guys to join us on this trip. Yeah, the magic question: why East Greenland? East Greenland is an incredible part of the world. It has some of the most majestic, grandest scenery anywhere on the planet. You know, even when comparing to Antarctica, which many of you may have been to, East Greenland is just the most spectacular place. It's somewhere that has vast icebergs, almost tabular icebergs like Antarctica, massive icebergs, and the landscapes that you can see through Greenland are truly stunning. So Greenland is somewhere for real, certainly East Greenland anyway, somewhere for a real feeling of desolation, or it'll make you feel very small, basically, against the landscape. And that's something that we don't get very often in the modern world. So we're hoping to be exploring the East Greenland National Park, the areas of Scoresbysund that we're able to get into. We're going to be going for hikes on shore. We're going to be spending time, hopefully, if we can get there, with the local Inuit population in Itokotormit, which is over one of the only settlements on the east coast of Greenland. And we hope to be able to get a little bit of sort of a touch on what modern life is like in Greenland these days, and experience the wildlife as well. So yeah, that's the main sort of gist of the trip. The expedition overview, so sort of journey at a glance. The dates for this trip are in late August, which is one of the best times to visit East Greenland. So we're going to be flying out from Reykjavik over to Constable Point on the 18th of August, and we'll be returning back on August 28th, having explored a vast area and hopefully had a life-changing experience with the wildlife, with the scenery, with everything for everybody. So it's an 11-day trip all around, which gives ample time to explore both through Scoresbysund and also up the, hopefully, if weather conditions allow, up the northeast coast as well, up the eastern side of Greenland. So starting point and finishing point is Reykjavik. We have chartered flights, especially for this trip, to fly up to the east coast of Greenland, Constable Point, where we'll meet the ship. We'll then have our expedition time in Greenland, and then we'll head back via that same charter flight back to Greenland, and then the trip formally ends there. And Iceland is a fantastic place as well. So for people who've never been, you can certainly tag on some time before or after your trip in Iceland to see the whole sort of wider area. The ship that we're using, a fantastic little ship which has been very recently renovated, called the Explorer. Carries just 12 passengers, so it's a perfect fit for natural world safaris and all of our guests who like small ship travel. And that gives the ultimate flexibility when it comes to shore landings, for going for hikes. We've only got 12 people, 2 Zodiacs, 6 people in each Zodiac. Maximum flexibility. We have the opportunity to get on off the ship as quickly as possible. From the cost point of view, just under $20,000 per person cost, and that pretty much includes most things, and I'll talk through that a little bit in a minute. It includes the flights and various other bits. So that's the sort of overview glance. Now we'll move on to the sort of a bit more in depth. Yeah. Day one, arrival in Greenland. So we will be flying from Reykjavik up to Constable Point, and we have a specially chartered flight for that. Now, Constable Point is a very remote airfield. It's a little mud strip, basically. The airport terminal doesn't have a Starbucks, doesn't have a Costa. It has a little sort of shed, basically. So it's you're already in sort of the Arctic wilderness, even as soon as you step off the plane, which just adds to that feeling of excitement. It's quite an amazing place. But we'll be getting off the plane there, and then there's about a 1 kilometer or so walk from the airstrip down to the ship itself, and the ship will be moored just offshore, and the expedition team will be there to pick you up as Zodiacs, take you and your luggage from the shore onto the ship, and then we'll be able to settle into our cabins, and the trip will be formally underway. You'll see then that the next little bit, day 2 to day 8, and there's only a short little bit about that. That's because an expedition cruise is super flexible. You know, we don't have a set itinerary. Nature, weather, ice sets the itinerary. You know, our expedition team and the captain on board will be using all their knowledge, all the tools that all the resources available to them, with the weather charts and ice charts and all of that, to decide where we go. We'll be spending time in Scoresbysund, exploring as much of the area as we're allowed to go down and explore. We'll hopefully be spending a little bit of time, if we can get into Itokotormit. That's the populated, I say populated loosely. It's a very small little town compared to a lot of obviously civilized areas. But we'll be hoping to visit there to see a little bit of Inuit culture, find out about how life has sort of is for them on the east coast of Greenland, and then hopefully head up the eastern side a little bit further into the Northeast Greenland National Park. And there are areas here which are very seldomly explored. Scoresbysund is where more of the trips are, but the Northeast Greenland National Park, super remote, super, you know, the ice, the scenery, the size of the scenery there is just immense, you know, and in the ship, it looks big when you're stood next to it, but it'll feel like you're sailing on a tiny little ship, sort of when you're in amongst these massive fjords. So really, really, really incredible. Then the final day is pretty much sort of the same as the outbound trip in reverse, and we'll come back through into Scoresbysund, possibly visit Itokotormit on the way in, but then we'll be having the disembarkation by Zodiac's reverse process of what we were when we boarded, and the whole idea then will be to get back onto the charter flight, head back down to Reykjavik, and then that's where the trip will formally end. So after 11 days, hopefully it'll feel like 11 months that we're on board, because it often does, you know, there's so much to go on. It feels like you've been on for a long time, loads of wildlife to see. But yeah, that's the sort of the overall of the trip. So the next sort of thing to talk about is the human side of Greenland. So the town of Itokotormit is pretty much, bar a couple, is the only other settlements that are there. There are also old settlements that are sort of, you know, the remains and relics of them that are kind of dotted around as well. And if we have the opportunity to, we might be able to go ashore in sort of around some of these areas. And our guides will talk you through the significance of the settlements, and sort of, you know, why they existed, why they no longer exist, and how the human culture side of Greenland has adapted to the changing environment, you know, the changing sort of areas that modern life brings ultimately. And here's just a glimpse of some of the landscapes that you can see. You know, this really is a sort of nutshell sort of style, but the ice is massive. These drone shots never do much to show the scale of the ice, but you know, you can see it a little bit on that one there, where the Zodiac is, you know, it's quite close in the foreground, but the ice that comes off some of the glaciers in Scoresbysund is just huge, and you know, you'll be absolutely dwarfed by the size of those glaciers. From a photography point of view as well, they're so photogenic, you know, under all the different lighting conditions, under the lower evening light, when it lights up with that sort of golden sunset, golden hour light going across the ice. So photographers really love the east coast of Greenland. And you can see here by some of the shots that, you know, that people are able to get. We're not able to use drones, but we will be able to get up and around the ice flows and in towards the glacial ice too. So for photographers, this is a fantastic trip. So moving forward, yeah, a few more sort of snapshots. So we operated this trip for the last few years. So these are kind of passenger shots, I guess, of people enjoying the trip. So we hope to be able to do the polar plunge. Great fun, highly recommend it, even if you don't like cold water like me. I hate cold water, but it's such a fun experience. And actually the ship as well, the Explorer, has a sauna. So jumping in the ice cold water, getting into the sauna, it's an excellent experience, and I imagine some of you will have done this before on wider Arctic trips. But yeah, we hope to get ashore to do lots of landings. We can go for hikes. We can explore with through any sort of settlements that we come across. We'll be, focusing on the landscape and focusing on the photography as well. We have a photographer on board, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But yeah, the whole idea will be to spend as much time ashore and immersing ourselves in that nature as possible. It really is an incredible, place. So moving on to the next bit, this is about the ship. So you're home away from home in the Arctic. A lot of the smaller ships are not so comfortable. The Explorer, the absolute opposite. I mean, you can see from these pictures in front here, it's been recently renovated. So the cabins, the size of the cabins as well, actually is fantastic. And the facilities of the ship for just a 12-passenger ship is really, really incredible. So it gives that kind of unique blend, really, of sort of semi-luxury, certainly a lot of comfort with a very small expedition ship, and not compromising that kind of, the whole feel of exploration that we want to focus on. There's also the engine standards on the ship now are fantastic. Fuel consumption is really, really low, and the engine's had a big overhaul with some new aspects on it too. So it's certainly from a physical touch on the landscape, it is very, very light. So we're conscious that we want to leave as little of a footprint as possible on the Arctic, and we feel that the Explorer is a fantastic ship to do just that. The next area to talk about, these are the guides that will absolutely make the trip. So Morten Jorgensen, one of our absolute polar legends. We've done a lot of work with Morten. He's guided on a lot of our trips before. Morten hails from Denmark, Greenland being a Danish colonized island. His knowledge and experience and understanding of Greenland is absolutely second to none. And he spent a lot of time exploring through exploring through all different areas of Greenland, especially the east coast. Now, Morten's words here, I won't read through all of these because I'll be you can see these anyway. But touching a little bit on the wildlife, Morten knows this very well. So muskox, pretty likely to encounter. There's good numbers of these. They're quite skittish. They can be a little bit sort of shy of humans, but there are a lot of them around, and we hope to be able to get some quite nice shots and quite nice sort of interactions with them at a distance. Also, various other animals: Arctic hare, Arctic fox. Really, both very, very photogenic species, especially the Arctic fox as well, and they're often very curious. So if we're near the shore, they'll come and sort of check us out. They're really, really fun animals to be around. Is the best way to describe it. Possibly seals and whales as well. Not the best area for seals and whales, but there are some around there. And if we're very, very lucky, we could hopefully see some polar bear, possibly even narwhal and snowy owl as well. Now, these would be, we've got to get lucky to see these, but we're in the right area at the right time. And certainly with Morten and Sandra, who the next page is about, and we'll touch on Sandra shortly. Morten and Sandra are hugely expertise and knowledgeable in knowing about wildlife behavior. They'll be able to search, and they'll spend pretty much 24/7 up on the bridge looking for wildlife. So if there is a bear or a narwhal or a muskox in the area, you can bet your money that Morten or Sandra will find them. Now, touching over to the next slide is just a bit about Sandra. Sandra is Swiss and one of our, again, absolute polar legends. Sandra works for lots of our different trips in the Arctic. She was recently in Svalbard doing our inaugural land and sea expedition, combining some snowmobiling with time on our ship Kinfish in Svalbard. And she spent a lot of time in East Greenland as well, and Antarctica. So her polar knowledge is massive. Her knowledge of Greenland is very, very good as well. And she spent a lot of time exploring these areas. So her knowledge on the wildlife and the culture and the landscapes is fantastic. I always sort of focus on the expedition team, but they really are the men and women, and in this case Sandra and Morten, who will bring the whole area to life. You'll really learn a lot and see a lot through Sandra's expertise. I don't know when they sleep. They seem to spend the whole entire time coming up with fantastic things to see and searching for wildlife. But they do an incredible job, and you'll come away as friends ultimately, having had the most incredible 11 days together. Next, questions that anybody has. I appreciate there's a lot of sort of aspects of this trip which might be unknown. It's a trip in an area that we don't often go to, and one of the areas that I can see in here is one of the questions I can see: do we spend much time off the ship? And the short answer is yes. We hope to spend as much time as possible off the ship. So the whole focus will be getting on either on zodiacs, as you can see in here, and exploring through the ice flows. And that in itself is incredible, you know, going through those ice flows with the crackling. You know, if you shut the engine off and all you can hear is the crackling of the little bubbles within the ice popping, you know, releasing air from 5,000-10,000 years ago that's been locked up in there is incredible. And certainly from a photography point of view as well, the ice is just so photogenic. Even the little bits floating around the brash ice in around the zodiacs it is incredible. We'll also be going for, like I said before, as many hikes. East Greenland is fantastic for hiking. The hikes that you can do are pretty much endless, and we'll hopefully be able to split into a couple of different groups. Those who want to spend a little bit of time on shore and maybe not go for too much of a hike. And then there'll be a group who might want to go a little bit further, a little bit more of a sort of exploratory hike. And we'll be able to sort of, you know, to play that by ear with how the group goes. Another question: can you show us a map of the planned route? I can show you I can sort of talk through the area that we're hoping to explore, but like I said before, the map is a wide area and we'll be exploring in it depending on the weather, depending on the ice conditions, and the captain and Sandra and Morten will be working that out on a day-by-day basis. So Scoresbysund is where we'll be starting off, and there are fjords that we can go through Scoresbysund to search for the wildlife, to go for hikes, to visit some of the historical sites, or we can then head out the northeast coast, up the east coast a little bit further north into the wider Northeast Greenland National Park. And this is a little bit of a sort of an area that's less explored, a bit more off the beaten track, and I think fantastic. So yeah, that's the sort of rough plan, but we can certainly send through a map of the wider area and show the area that we hope to explore with kind of like a circle around it. Another question about flights. The flights being, you know, sort of it's subject to weather. Yes, that can happen in the same way that it can with Svalbard as well. Svalbard can be prone to sort of fog and things like that. So the short answer is yes, delays can happen to flights, but we will be very much obviously working with the airline to maximize our chance of getting there within the weather windows. Sometimes we can pull the flights a little bit earlier or move them back a little bit later if the weather is a little bit iffy. But normally the weather is okay. But we'll know in sort of the run up to that what the forecast is and how that's likely to affect it. Another question about weather as well. Very good question about weather. What are the temperatures like at that time? Kind of similar to Svalbard, maybe a little bit warmer. The east coast of Greenland, just because of the sort of latitudes that it's situated at, is about 68 to 72, 73 degrees north. So it's not as far north as Svalbard, which means it's typically a little bit warmer. You can get weather that comes off the ice sheet. You can get some sort of you know, simpler versions of katabatic winds, which bring colder weather down. But similarly, you can get warmer weather coming up from the south as well. So temperatures are going to be somewhere between sort of 5 and 15 degrees Celsius most of the time, which is probably 40 or so to maybe 50, 55 Celsius, Fahrenheit, sorry, for temperature. It's a very dry area as well. It doesn't rain very much. Most of the Arctic actually is a desert. So in terms of sort of rainfall, it's unlikely to be very wet, but the temperature can vary a little bit, but yeah, usually quite stable. Any other questions? Are there single rooms on the ship? Great question. Yes, there is one single room remaining. We have 2 single cabins. One is booked. We have 1 single room remaining. Another question, I like this question. If I want to book, how do I do that? I'm available after this call. I'll be around for a couple of hours. So all our details will be on the end and I'll talk you through our numbers, but I'll be available. So if you want to give me a call, please do. You can call me on the number that will be provided, and I can answer any more questions sort of in detail on there as well. So that's definitely something I'm very happy to help with. I'm just looking through the remainder of the questions to make sure I've not missed any. Here's a great one. I have been to Svalbard with you before and loved it. What do you think really sets Greenland apart? Great question. Svalbard and Greenland might look similar on paper, and to a certain extent they are, but they're very different in many important ways. So Svalbard is where you would go if wildlife is your priority. It's where you've got the best chance to see polar bears, walrus, various different whale species, more bird life. East Greenland is best for scenery. East Greenland is best for vast ice, and a lot of people will talk about Antarctica or the the fjords of Norway or New Zealand as being vast scenery. This is up there on the absolute same level, if not above, in terms of scenery. The size of Scoresby Sund, world's largest fjord system, it is vast, and to go somewhere and just lose yourself in that environment basically is the draw for a lot of people to East Greenland. The ice, the size of the landscape is vast. Also, for anybody who is into geology, some fantastic geological formations and rock geology in East Greenland generally. I know Morten is very knowledgeable on that, so Morten will be sort of explaining more about the geology on board. But a lot of people who've traveled with us in the past have gone for with a real geology interest and sort of background, and have come away sort of loving every minute of it. So for any geologists listening to this, this is a fantastic trip for this. I'm just going to check through other questions. One more question. Talk about hiking. Is that on ice or turf? It'll be mostly on land. Reason being is because the glaciers are quite dangerous places, and you typically need to be roped up. You need to have crampons. And there's a lot of different safety sort of aspects that we have to do for glaciers. So most of the hikes will be based on land, which means that, in terms of sort of grip and slipping, that, is obviously a lot safer. We also provide the expedition muck boots, which will be for use on those hikes. They're very warm, they're very comfortable. They are waterproof expedition boots just up to below the knee. So for any shore landings that we do into, say, 6-8 inches of water on the beach, you're protected from that, obviously, but then hiking is great. But yeah, that's the sort of the nutshell of the trip. I'd imagine many of you might have other more detailed questions, and I am around for the next couple of hours and able to help on the phone. So please do either drop us an email or give me a call. Like I said, very happy to help with questions in detail. Our numbers are on the next slide. Here you go. Here's our details on there. And I think actually you'll probably get emailed through a copy of this webinar with the slides, with everything on there, so you can have these details. But yes, thank you very much for joining us. We hope that many of you are intrigued and really want to come and join us on this trip. I, for one, think it's going to be an incredible time. We've done it in the past and we've had excellent feedback about it. So I'd love to welcome on board as many of you as we can, and hopefully be speaking with some of you very shortly after this. Thank you very much for joining us, and take care. Bye for now.